Most owners are so busy running their practice that they never stop to ask if they're building the right thing. Well, today's guest has enough experience in private practice to know the difference. Welcome to Freedom by Design. I'm Jamey Schrier. This is a show for private practice owners and independent thinkers who want to build a business and a life on their own terms. Most of us start a practice to create freedom, and somewhere along the way, it starts running us. This show is about changing that. My guest today has been in this profession for more than 40 years. He's owned practices in two states, partnered with a larger regional group, served as COO, and ultimately as company lead before retiring in 2025. He spent 9 years on the APTA Private Practice Section Board of Directors, including 6 as president, and received the Robert G. Dykus Award, one of the most respected honors in private practice leadership. And now he's brought all that amazing experience to Practice Freedom U, where he's an executive coach working with practice owners who are ready to build something special that actually works for them. Tom DiAngelis, great having you on, my man.
It's great to be here, Jamey. I appreciate the opportunity to chat today. So thank you.
Absolutely, my pleasure. Um, 40 years, man.
40 plus, yeah.
40 plus, I'm sure, like myself, who's in that 30-year plus range, it does fly by, doesn't it?
It does. And that I think that that's part of the beauty of our profession, physical therapy. There's always if you're a treating clinician, there are always new patients. There's always something new, something changing. And I've had a lot of change throughout my career, moving different practice settings and that, but I've always done it knowing that, hey, I'm in a great profession. If things go south, I have other opportunities ahead of me, and it'll bring more change. So it's gone really, really quick, without a doubt.
Well, let's kind of talk about that. You know, you've been in this profession for a long time, and you've seen the changes, the ebbs and flows. I think one of the consistents has been insurance companies rarely say, "Hey, we're going to pay you more money because we just think you're great." There's always been cuts down. There's been ebbs and flows where there's been a rush of new therapists out there. Now there's not a lot of therapists compared to what the need out there. I guess what has been just your take, kind of looking at the big picture initially, like what stands out to you with the ebbs and flows over the years? And I guess how have you seen it with just the changes in the healthcare industry, specifically in your experience in physical therapy?
Yeah, that's a great question. When I started, particularly in private practice, back in the Cincinnati area, which was in the late 80s, I used to say that back then we could be profitable and make money despite ourselves. We started out, my partner and I, we didn't know what we were doing. We didn't have all the resources that are available today. And, through the years, as you already pointed out, things started to change and change pretty rapidly, particularly the insurance with payment started to change. And then, of course, all the authorizations required and whatnot. The one thing that stands out to me is that private practitioners are survivors. Uh, they figure it out. I cannot tell you how many times I went to conferences and I was told private practice is dead. Sell now before it's a fire sale. Get out, and private practitioners figure it out. They pivot. They figure out how to do things. Now, sometimes, many times, particularly today, I think it gets very overwhelming for a lot of private practitioners, particularly the small practice that maybe they don't have others to lean on. Maybe they're not part of a big network where they have resources. And the changes are happening so fast, and there are so many. every payer has different rules. Medicare has their rules, your work comp has their rules, the private payers have, and it gets very overwhelming, I think, much more today than in the past. But that's probably the biggest thing I see happening right now, which creates so much downward pressure on practice owners. Uh,
Okay, so that's a good point. And as we know, pressure creates emotion inside all of us. And that emotion, whether it's fear, whether it's just stress or overwhelm, can lead to making maybe not the best decisions. One of my favorite sayings is when emotion is high, intelligence is low. And
mm.
that's a scientific fact because of how our brain works and that fight or flight response comes into play. What is your, I guess, perspective around people that are kind of making some of these emotional decisions and then having, unfortunately, some of the results and outcomes that come from that? I guess, um, what does that look like to you based on your experience, your own decision making, working with your teams over the years, and now coaching others? Um, what's the real danger with that?
Yeah, I think the danger is, when you're making an emotional decision, which we've all done. I mean, that's just part of it. I think that the danger is that you're not thinking through all the what ifs. What if this happens? What if that happens? And how do you do that? And that's where I think it's so important to have somebody or somebody that you can talk to that can help you see through help you see clearly, basically, and through all the weeds. Maybe for some people it's their spouse, right? I fortunately, for the last 20 some years, my spouse is a physical therapist and in administration, and could talk very openly about the business and whatnot and see things. And she's very wise, and sometimes she would just listen to me and then ask one simple question that would get me thinking and seeing things clearer. I think that's the beauty of what we do in executive coaching. People they want to do this and they want to do that, and but slowing them down and helping them see clearly as to, okay, maybe that is a great idea, but let's really talk about this. And that's where having somebody, something, an organization, whatever, that you can talk to, I think, is so critical, so that you don't make mistakes that could be very costly. Quite honestly,
Yeah.
I'll tell you a quick story about the biggest mistake my partner and I made, talking about emotional decisions, was, we we had gotten to the point, we had our third practice, and a lot of our peers that we looked up to, they owned their buildings, right? And so what do we think? We think we need to own a building, of course. So a building comes for sale in the town where one of our clinics is, and we look at it and we buy this building. We didn't put a ton of thought into it. It was just an emotional thing. We wanted to be building owners, wanted to pay ourselves rent.
Right.
Long story short, in the time from when we bought the building to when we got the architect involved, well, that practice in that town continued to grow. And now the building was going to be too small unless we put a second level on it. We couldn't expand out because of regulations on parking lot size. We ended up taking a big bath on this building, and lost a lot of money and had to resell it without ever doing anything to it. And had we stopped and maybe talked to some people, had some discussions about where we want to go in the future, what the plans were, we probably would have held off buying that building and not lost a lot of money. True emotional decision. It was all pure emotion. So, but we were property owners for a while, building owners.
Well, it's funny because you're bringing up a couple things. One, this comparison, like, oh, they own buildings, maybe we should. And then you bring up what I think is the real killer is we all have an ego. We all
Yeah.
have a sense of pride. We all have a sense of we are very smart and we are like, I want to be I want to be a building owner. They have real estate. I'm a real estate guy. And you make a reactive decision without thinking through, well, where is your business headed? Is this going to be viable for the next 3 years or whatever? And yours wasn't viable for 1 minute because you never moved in because it was already too small, which again, is a good problem. But I bet whatever money you guys made in the business growing went into this building that you then had to turn around and sell. And I assume that you didn't sell it for more than what you paid for.
Absolutely not. And yeah, it was one of those things where, fortunately, another business owner that we knew in town that had a an architecture business, he took it off our hands. Let's just put it that way. So, yeah.
So let's talk about the I guess the elephant that's in the room around business ownership. So you've had a ton of experience. You worked as a small private practice owner. You worked in a bigger, larger company. Now more than ever is this talk around overwhelm, talk around, burned out. I think stress is not necessarily a bad thing. Look, you're a business owner, you're going to have an increased amount of stress. That kind of comes with the territory. But when you add overwhelm to that, overwhelm leads to emotion and bad decisions, and burnout is no fun with anybody. What's your take on this whole idea that the word overwhelm and the word burnout is just becoming just everyday language now? Where is that coming from your perspective? And what do you say to your coaching clients who are experiencing that, and maybe some of the people that you've just spoken to, over the recent years?
Yeah, great question. Because it does obviously, particularly the term burnout has become kind of the term of recent years, right? And what's
Hmm.
interesting about that is as you know, not only do we hear it from owners, but we hear it from our staff, therapists who have been in the profession only a couple of years, and they're talking about burnout, right? And I've always wondered what exactly does that mean when you're only a staff therapist for a couple of years versus the owner operator who's been in the trenches for probably many years, and what's the difference in that, and it's sometimes it's hard to get an exact answer as to what do they mean by burnout, right? I think from the ownership perspective, I think that there's so much that's impacting the business and happening so fast that, and the owner has so many things to do. That's where feeling overwhelmed comes in. It's like stuff is just coming rapid fire. And let's face it, a lot of owners are still um, treating patients. Many of them are the primary therapist in the clinic. They still see the majority of patients. So they're trying to make sure they're taking care of their patients, their referral sources, and at the same time, all these things are coming at them that overwhelms them. And I think that's what they feel then means that they're burned out or they're getting burned out. It's the being
Right.
overwhelmed. And part of that is, how do we help them be able to get to a point where they could step back? I think part of what they need is time. They need time to think through things and discuss things. And a lot of times they don't have that. They're just having to gun and run and gun and run and gun. So
So
part of
what are
that
they
is
supposed to do? You have a business owner, and obviously you're talking about a smaller business owner, which is a different
right.
animal, right?
Absolutely.
Um, but what if you have someone that is doing, let's say, 1.5 million, 2 million in annual revenue, but they still feel overwhelmed because, maybe they're not treating as much or treating at all, but they're getting inundated with questions, inundated with trying to, quote, put out the fires and stuff like that, and they don't have time. And yet you're saying, as a guide, as a coach, hey, we need to carve out more time because you need time to think, you need time to strategize. How do you create that? And what have you seen, like in your experience, what happens when they do create that? Because I know there's a lot of fear and worry around letting go and doing all of that and not being the center of everything.
Yeah. So one of the things that, to start, what I like to do is I like to get a first, give me um, something that tells me exactly where is your time being spent daily, weekly in your business. What are
Yeah.
you spending your time on? And, where are you spinning your wheels? Just so I can have a good understanding of where they're spending their time. Then looking at, okay, let's look at your team. do you have to do A? Is there somebody else on the team that can take this off your plate? Are you utilizing your team appropriately? Because a lot of times, we as owners feel like we have to do everything or we have to have our hand in everything. And I get that. It's our baby, right? We started it. It's sometimes it's that attitude that nobody can do it better. But
Do
many
you
times,
agree with that thinking though? Like you said, we've all experienced that, and obviously I know I have, but you've experienced that. What was that thinking that caused you to do that? And most important, what shifted for you not to buy into that level of thinking that shifted to then allow you to move something off your plate and allow you to trust the people that were working for you? Because I think that's really the biggest thing. I mean, you just mentioned before, well, the first thing we have to do is identify where we're spending our time, which I agree. That's one of the core things we do at PFU is identifying it. Then once we identify the thing that we want to move, now we're touching on like the deeper stuff. We're
Mhm.
out of the logic phase and we're into the deeper emotional. What has been your personal experience in doing that? And what was the shift to kind of move past that?
Yeah. So, I had the fortunate experience in my first private practice in Ohio that I had a business partner a therapist who, fortunately, we got along great. She was excellent, very, great business mind. We were pretty much on the same page. And so we had each other to talk to and say, okay,
Right.
what are we doing? Why are we doing this? And to bat things off of to say, you know what? We why are we involved in this when we have so and so here who can manage the front office, who can manage everything? Um, putting in our third office, actually putting a director in there instead of us trying to run it from afar. Things like that. So I had the advantage of being able to bat things around with her, and we kind of were each other's coaches, and
Yeah.
that helped us move away. Um, Granted, some of the things were personal, family pressures, right? Often come in when whether it's physical therapy or any small business owner, there could be a lot of family pressures because of your time, and that makes you step back and think a little bit, and how you can maybe manage it better. So I had that advantage of having that business partner, which really helped me when I had my second practice and I was the sole business owner. And now at that point, I did have my wife as a consultant for a while in the business and whatnot to have that other person, until another local company hired away from me, my friend. Yeah, so. But I had that advantage there as well. But I had learned
Right.
from prior experience that, okay, I'm not going to do it. When I bought the second practice, I was not a full-time treating therapist. I actually saw some strength in people that were there already, that I promoted somebody into heading up the billing team right away, and she's a rock star. So I had that experience then at that point that made it easier the second time around, to make sure I didn't get into a trap of being overwhelmed and
Yeah. So Tom, how do you coach and guide people that do not have a partner?
yeah, essentially that's where I and other executive coaches come in to really, in working with them, try to help them get clarity into, okay, how is the business functioning? How's it operating? Where do you want to get to? A lot of times they don't know exactly even where they want to get, right?
Right.
So helping them really get clarity on where they want to be, and then saying, okay, let's set up a plan. Okay. Let's focus on, okay, you want to get there. We have to do this in steps. It's not going to happen overnight. What's the first step? What do we have to do to get you there? And through those discussions, get them thinking about it so that they say, oh, okay, yeah, you're right. I can't be doing this, that, and the other thing. Sometimes they may have to hire somebody in, which is a difficult thing because they're thinking of the money end of it.
Right.
Uh, but they have to see that sometimes you have to invest to get to that next level, right? Sometimes it's an investment. And so through discussion, through asking a lot of questions, helping clarify for them where they need to get to and where they want to get to, how to get there. So yeah,
Yeah, no, I totally get it. I mean, it really comes down to what is it that you want?
yeah,
How bad do you want it? And are you willing to do what it takes to get there? And all the answers could be yes. And then all of a sudden you're like, well, we're going to have to, let's say they're still holding on to 20 hours a week in the clinic, but they have therapists that are underutilized that are certainly capable of handling that, but they just feel like, yeah, but they really want me in the clinic, and I just feel like I can't totally let go because I need to keep an eye on things. Like all of those limited beliefs that aren't true, but are true for them, you ultimately help them realize that, look, that is limiting you from getting what you want. So you can either hold on to this or you can let go and grow and allow your team to own these areas. And ultimately, like you said, the coach helps provide that level of clarity where the owner can actually make a decision. Without that level of clarity, because of the questions you're asking, we won't even think like that. And then we'll start looking for other solutions that don't require us to do the thing that we fear the most.
yeah, yeah.
That,
Well, I think one of the most powerful questions is, what do you want? What do you want? Right?
dude, that's a
I,
tough question sometimes.
I just had that come up last week with a client that has a situation that's developed with their practice, and it could be a very positive thing. And as we were talking, they were going, over all different things, all different things, all different, and then finally, at some point, I wasn't sure where they wanted to go with it, and I just asked that one simple question: What do you want with this? Where do you want to go? And that helped me a lot because it made them tell me, okay, here's what would be ideal if this happened,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah,
So,
I do this. I do the same. I started adding in another part to that. As coaches, asking why is like we don't like to ask why too many times because sometimes asking why. Same thing with your staff. Why were you late? It's very attacking and accusatory.
uh,
But I think in this instance, I think it works when you have good rapport. But I'll ask a client, same thing. Like what is it that you want? And then why is that important or meaningful to you?
mhm,
Because it's not just saying, well, I want 5 clinics. I want 3 clinics. I want to hire 3 more therapists. I want to make $500,000. Whatever it is, it doesn't really matter. We're not here to judge, but it's connecting it to something that is important to you. Because if it's not connected to something that's important or meaningful, the minute it gets difficult, the minute those fears and worries come up, you'll let it go. But if it has legs and roots, you won't.
mhm.
You'll lean into that.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, Switching a little bit here, Tom, to partnerships. There's some people out there that are listening that are in partnerships or that may be thinking about adding a partner. Yeah, you've had experience with partnerships. You've worked in a bigger company that had kind of this pseudo type of partnerships. Your wife works in a very large company that their model is kind of partnerships and building and growing. With all of your experience in partnerships, what's your advice twofold? One, someone that is interested in bringing on a partner, and two, someone that's in a partnership, what's your wisdom of how to make that partnership work, especially if they're having some challenges?
Yeah. Like I said, I was very fortunate in my first practice that I had a great partner. However, I think what's important, and I'm sure I've seen some of my younger practitioners that have gone into partnerships where it's gone south, and that could be very costly, and it's like a divorce, really. But I think it all starts at first of all, if you're developing a practice, you're thinking of going into a partnership, or let's say you're already in and you're going to bring in a partner, I think what's critical there is to make sure you have all the agreements before you start. Simple things. Who's going to handle what? All right, Jamey, you have HR, I have finance, whatever the case might be, and have that
Yep.
very well spelled out. My partner and I, we had that spelled out, and if we didn't agree on something, the decision came down to whose area of responsibility it was, and we lived by that. Um, So having that in place, having simple things buy sell agreements, and this is where attorneys are so important that, if you and I are partners and one of us wants out or one of us passes away, I actually know a guy that I worked with recently who had two partners pass away on him. They had three people, and
Yeah.
fortunately they had everything in order. So I think in the beginning is working with an attorney, making sure you have everything in order that you need, should that partnership go south. The last
Quick
thing,
comment there,
what's that?
Tom.
Yeah.
Real quick comment there. So my coach, Walt, is a former trial attorney. So he acts also as my attorney because he has experience. So we've been working together 9 years. And I've uh, introduced him to some people, some clients that I have. I said, look, we should probably talk to an attorney just to get some things clear. And he always starts with that. He goes, the first question he starts with, how do you get out of it?
Yeah.
Like you said, what happens when it goes south? And that is something no one ever is talking about because it's like the honeymoon phase.
Yes.
Everything is great. Oh my God, we're never not gonna look. I had a partner. I don't talk about this that much. I had a partner before I even opened up my own practice. I had a partner in another business that was focusing on golf and golf performance, right when, before it even got popular. And we didn't have that. And I wanted out. I was like, this is not really what I want to do. I want to just open up my own place and build that. And we had to figure it out. I mean, we did, but there was some contentious conversation. So what you're saying is spot on. Beginning of the partnership, what happens if it ends? How do we
Exactly.
do that? Then the other thing you're saying is getting clear on who does what.
Right.
Same thing when we hire someone. What is their role? What is their responsibility? Because if not, it becomes this mishmash of stuff, and I'm jumping into your stuff, you're jumping into mine. It's inefficient, it causes confusion. So those are gold for people that are thinking about getting into partnerships. My question now is, what if they're in a partnership and it's having some challenges. They don't want to leave the partnership. They want to make it work, but it's having some challenges. What's your advice for someone that's in that situation?
Yeah. Yeah, those are, those are always tough. I think, most things come down to communication. You have to be able to have those crucial conversations with each other and to understand that, hey, we need to have these conversations. Nothing's personal here, but let's put the chips on the table and let's really talk it through. Now, in some cases, maybe it helps to have a third party with that. That can help you talk together and figure things out. Um, it's kind of like I look at it similar to what a friend of mine who is an attorney told me once with divorce. He said, if couples that were divorcing could just sit and talk and figure things out as best as possible before they went to attorney, he said, we wouldn't be making all this money. He said, but they don't because it's like this, right? So having that conversation, having those crucial conversations is really what it comes down to. And let's face it, most people, nobody likes having crucial conversations, but it's something that you have to do. So I think it's communication, and trying to make sure that you're taking anything personal out of it. It's business. Let's just talk about it and figure out where we need to go. There's
Yeah.
another um, interesting thing when you talk about partnerships, because I've been in the situation where I partnered my practice with a Seattle-based company, and then we partnered with a larger company after that. But one of the things, I think, if you're thinking of partnering with another company like I did, and when I say partnering, it's because it wasn't totally an outright sale. There was still some ownership involved, which most companies want, right?
Right.
I think a lot of times practice owners just look at the dollars, right? Okay,
Mhm.
they're going to pay me X. They're going to pay. And I'll be very honest, I left money on the table. I had a better offer than when I partnered with the Seattle group. And the reason I went with the Seattle group was culture. I
Yeah.
wanted to make sure that I was joining a group that had the right culture for my team because my team was important to me. I wanted to make sure they were taken care of. Yes, I could have put more money in my pocket, but it was critical to me that it was the right culture. And I think that's something that's often missed. And I would encourage practice owners that are looking at partnering with whether it's another PT group or maybe you're going to bring out in outside money. What is the culture? What are their goals? Are they aligned with yours? And those things are so important when you're entering into a partnership like that. The last thing you want is to get into something. Yeah, you've put maybe money in your pocket or whatever, but then your team falls apart. Nobody's happy. It can go really spiral out of control pretty quickly. So yeah,
Yeah, yeah, great point. I think one of the things that you said was when you're talking with your partner, let's say you're having some challenges, I think it's important for you both to get clear on what you want from this. Even if you're already partners and maybe you didn't do this, because most people don't take the time to ask that. They're just like, well, we just want to make money from this. We want to help people. We want to do it our way. But it has to be something more than that. So, what do you want from this practice? What do you want from this partnership? And having those, as you said, crucial conversations, or we call them clarity conversations at PFU, but having those difficult conversations and being honest with yourself. By nature, we're people pleasers. And a
yes,
lot of times we say things to try to please the other and not cause friction or tension or confrontation. And the reality is we do that at the expense of what we really want. Um,
yeah,
we use a motto in PFU that I'm sure you know, of course you know, that says we begin with the end in mind. And the idea, no matter who you're partnering, whether you're bringing on a partner, whether you're bringing on partners, because that might be your strategy of growth, or whether you're partnering with a venture capital firm or partnering with another company, a couple of things that you said. One is, what are the three most important things you want from this partnership? You said, be clear on what your goals are. I think there's something even deeper than that that you and I have had lots of conversations around. What are the values that you hold most dear? What are those values? And one of the things you should absolutely want is someone else that holds and shares those values. Because if you hold a certain value to heart, your value is team before anything. You cared about your team, the culture, their lives. Well, there's some companies, VC companies in particular, they might say in words, of course, we care about our people, but they are driven, just the nature of their industry, they are driven with dollars. That
absolutely.
is the only measuring stick. It's simple. That's the value of the. So if you go into a partnership, which I've seen so many times, we go in with a partnership to a VC that's going to give us money or buy us or acquire us, whatever it is. Your value is this, their value is this. It's never been brought up clearly. And all of a sudden you're like, oh my God, I just signed a deal with the devil. And I say, no, I said, no, you didn't. You signed a deal without being clear in what we both wanted from this and what our values were. So what I'm hearing you say, Tom, is exactly that.
Mhm. Yeah. It's interesting. I don't know. You just made me think of this. Uh, Sitting back and how often do we step back and think, you know, why did I start and why did I go into my own business into private practice? What was it that you know, got me to take this huge step, and I think we often lose sight of that, which I think is important if you're looking at whatever, selling, partnership, whatever is, why did I do this in the first place? And is this, where I want to end up? It was interesting when we started our practice in Ohio, it was one of these things where my partner and I were working in a large medical healthcare system there. And I was a director, she was a supervisor, and we were there late one night. And she just really walked in my office and said, "Hey, we're really doing a lot for this healthcare system. We're here late at night. We're doing all this shit. If we're going to work this hard, what do you think if we just do it for ourselves, And
Yeah.
that's really what sparked. It was that, the idea of, okay, let's see if we can put a partnership together. It was really we wanted to do it for us and to treat patients the way we wanted to treat them and that's really why we started, right? But Yeah.
Yeah.
Why do others start? Was it sometimes maybe it is money. I don't know,
Well, I think, I mean, I've, coached hundreds and hundreds of private practice owners, and I think the one that I hear the most, they started almost as the default. They started because they didn't like the way it was being done where they were working.
Yeah.
So they started it out of there. Very rarely, I think, do people, at least they haven't told me, they started because, you know, I want to make a ton of money and grow this massive thing. Some people do, and there's nothing wrong with that. I
Right.
think wanting to make money should be a focus because your business is designed to make money. And if you have issues with money, your business is going to not do well and you're not going to do well. But yeah, there's lots of different reasons that people have. And I think the take home message and what we're talking about is be clear in what you want, whether it's a partnership, whether it's the purpose of your business, whether it's to start a business, whether it's to remove yourself from some of the day to day to grow locations. Just be clear in what you want. And I would add the caveat, and why is it important to you? Meaning, how is this going to impact your life? What you want for your family and stuff. Because when you get that level of depth, which of course, as executive coaches that we are in PFU, we help you uncover that. It allows more clarity and allows decisive action. Um, Real quick, I know we're ending up on time here a little bit, but I want to address this question around diversification with respect to business. You know that in the last 5 or 10 years, the focus on we have to offset declining reimbursements by adding in other non-third party services, or people are just going into cash-based businesses and having different revenue streams, so to speak, or verticals, as it's said in the corporate world. What are your thoughts about that? What's your kind of experience in working with people, or your own experience in doing this around this idea of diversifying? When should they? When should they hold off? Yeah, I'd just like to get your just thoughts with this.
Yeah. I first thought about this several years ago with a friend who, in private practice, who had diversified into, they had a prosthetics orthotics division, they had a hospital division, and they said, the nice thing about that was when their private practice was down, they had other legs basically to keep the stool up, right, to keep things going, which is great. So I think there's a lot of benefit to diversifying. I think what's really important though is you you have to make sure you're if you're a physical therapist in private practice, your core business is your clinics, your private practice. Sometimes I think diversification, people feel like, oh, I need to do it, but what happens is it adds one more thing to their plate that's then pulling away from running their private practice, and that's where they have to be really, really careful. I think if people want to diversify, for example, the company I retired from, we had dietitians, we had athletic trainers, we had occupational therapists, physical therapists, massage therapists. It was a larger company, but if you want to start going into other areas, or maybe it's a fitness center, I think it's really important that you think through it to have the right people in place to be able to run that leg so that you don't pull yourself away from your core business. And I think that's where that can lead to, again, being overwhelmed, right? Oh, I have this, now I have that. And I think it becomes it's probably like we talked earlier, people get really excited. It's an emotional decision. Oh,
Oh
yeah,
yeah.
I'm going to have a health club, right? And they make that
Look at me, I'm
emotional decision.
expanding. I'm gonna have this now and this
Yeah,
now.
and let's face it, you and I have talked. A lot of times people feel they have to do these things because they talk to others and that's what they're doing. And they feel like, oh, I got to expand. I got to do this. If,
Yeah.
so I think diversification is good. I think it can add revenue streams, but I think you really have to think through it and do it properly so that you're not pulling it, spreading yourself thinner, becoming more overwhelmed and impacting your core business, your physical therapy practice. So,
Yeah. And there's
that's
some
kind of where my
specific
head's at.
questions you got to ask yourself. And again, this is another plug for executive coaching, working with someone like
Sure.
yourself, because this is what you help someone think through, because those decisions could be hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars. So we have to be really careful. I know when I'm looking at someone that is either looking to diversify, I would say the same thing as looking to expand, like location wise. It's the same principles. The first thing I always say is make sure your existing house is in order. And what that means is if you add other revenue streams or you add other locations, all it's going to do is amplify what you're already doing. There's a great saying that says growth amplifies dysfunction. So if you don't have things tight, adding a location is going to wreak havoc. I got a quick story on that in a second. If you don't have your core business tight, meaning if you're at 60% utilization and your target is 80% utilization, you are leaving a ton of money on the table. And there's reasons why your utilization is low. If you don't fix that, this next thing that you do, this next business vertical diversifying thing, you're going to go in with the same experience and thought that you had with this core business, which means the likelihood of making the same mistakes and this thing not being profitable are extremely high. Focus on the core business, get that to a profitable, systematic way. It doesn't have to be perfect, but it has to be something that you can then shift your attention to something else and not have this collapse. That's the take home. I'll leave you
Makes
with this
sense.
before asking Tom, real quick. What'd you say?
I said that makes perfect sense, what you
Yeah.
just said. Yeah.
So here's a quick story. I was talking to people. Jamey had one location when I had my private physical therapy practice. What did I do? Spent a bunch of money, bought another practice. I was like, okay, it's not too far away, so I checked that box. I could share some of the referral sources. I checked that box. Um, the box I didn't check was we were doing about 600,000 in my one business. However, I never realized how much dependent it was on me. Now that I see, I'm like, of course it was only 600,000. Of course it was dependent. What happened? Went and bought the new one. It had 4 or 5 people in there. It was doing, I don't know, 700,000 or whatever. 3 out of the 4 people left,
Mm.
providers, they left. I had to do whatever I had to do to keep that thing going. Took my eye off of my original clinic, lost 1/3 of the
Oh,
revenue.
wow. Wow.
And it took me a year, maybe even a little longer, to stabilize both. Real big mistake. Anyways, Tom, thanks, man. Thanks for your wisdom. Thanks for your advice. And of course, if you are interested in coaching and maybe getting some guidance, or if you just want to speak to Tom, absolutely reach out to him. You can do that through Practice Freedom U and schedule a time where you can speak with Tom or one of our other coaches. Tom, you're also on LinkedIn. They can reach out to you on LinkedIn as well.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yep, just Tom DiAngelis. You can do that. And look, if there's something that resonated with you today, don't just listen and take more stuff in. Do something with it. Act on something. And if you want more clarity about where your business is right now and what you need to focus on next, then take our tool called the Practice Growth Assessment. It will help you gain better clarity, understand what's driving your business and what may be holding you back. So then someone like Tom can talk you through that. And if this episode helped you think differently, share it with another practice owner, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Believe me, they will thank you. Thanks for listening. I'm Jamey Schrier, and this is Freedom by Design.